Back by popular demand, we have our good friend Elie Honig, who's CNN senior legal analyst, former federal and state prosecutor, and author of Untouchable: How People Get Away with It. Hey, Elie, thanks for joining us last minute, and I put that out there because we weren't planning on doing this. We're taping on the 21st of March, a significant date. We don't know what's going to happen today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day. Assume for a moment that former President Donald Trump is, in fact, indicted in New York City and Manhattan through the DA's office. First of all, for those who argue they're watching right now, hey, this is a political prosecution. Trump puts out on social media, go out there, protest. We don't know what's going to happen or not happen. We pray that January 6th does not happen again. A political prosecution, you say?
Well, Steve, it's hard to know the subjective intent behind the DA here. I should add right up front, I know Alvin Bragg. I'm friends with him, the Manhattan DA. I used to work with him. We were federal prosecutors together at the Southern District of New York. Let me sort of make the argument why I can see it both ways. On the one hand, this is sort of part of the inherent problem whenever you have a local elected partisan. I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean the person has an R or a D next to their name. Prosecutor. I was lucky. I always got to work for federal prosecutors and in New Jersey for the AG, neither of whom are elected. They are appointed. But whenever you have elected local county DAs bringing charges against former federal officials, there will be an easy claim to make that it's political, and people will reasonably think there may be some political motivation. On the other hand, Alvin Bragg has a long record, I think, of playing it straight. I worked with him. He's a good prosecutor. And if you think back a year ago, Steve, almost exactly a year ago now, news came out that Alvin Bragg was not interested or not willing to charge Donald Trump. He didn't think the evidence was there to charge Trump with a different financial case.
I'm sorry, Elie, for interrupting. Yeah. Let's be clear. This has to do with, I believe, the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels in connection with the 2016 campaign. Michael Cohen, key witness here again. Watch Elie talk about this on a daily basis on CNN. This is a bigger picture discussion. But that was considered, quote, hush money to keep Stormy Daniels quiet, which the DA in Manhattan says, hey, wait a minute, that's a campaign violation because you're using money to influence the camp.
Yeah. So this is the allegation that we're looking at now. And look, I have been skeptical about the seriousness of these charges. I've been skeptical about the quality of the proof. And the crime here, it's really important to understand, Steve, the crime is not paying hush money. You are allowed to pay hush money. It's not great. I don't advise it, but
therefore, a married man who wants to keep it from his wife, that's what some would argue on the Trump side. That's what he did. That's all he did. And by the way, Michael Cohen, they say, did it on his own to help his friend Donald Trump. Go ahead.
It's unseemly, but it's not necessarily illegal. It's not a crime. Also, other people say, well,
the legal criminal? Where's the criminal?
So here's the criminal under, and we're talking New York state law here. The crime under New York state law is falsifying of business records. So the allegation is that these hush money payments, by the way, I don't know what the proper way to categorize a hush money payment to a porn star would be, but they were categorized on the internal books of the Trump organization as legal fees. They were not legal fees. That is the entire basis for the case. Now, if the Manhattan DA can prove that, and as to Donald Trump, if they can prove Donald Trump knew about how these entries were logged in the books, and there's a substantial question about that, that's only a misdemeanor, Steve, which is less serious than a felony. The max penalty there is a year, but realistically, no one goes to prison on a misdemeanor, certainly of this nature. If, however, they can take that next step that you talked about and prove that the reason these documents were falsified was to make them a campaign contribution, was because this money was meant to cover up for Donald Trump politically or electorally, as opposed to spare Donald Trump and his family from embarrassment and humiliation, then it's a campaign contribution in excess of the legal limits. Then it becomes a felony, but even then it's what we call a Class E felony, which is the least serious type of felony, 4-year maximum technically, but very unlikely, well, not very, I'll say quite likely that a judge does not sentence a person on a first-time nonviolent Class E to prison.
Okay, but also there's a case potentially that could be coming in Georgia having to do with trying to influence the election process in Georgia through the presidential election in 2020. We'll see what the prosecutors down there do. There's some other cases as well having to do with January 6th. Here's my question, Elie. It's a bigger picture question because, again, we're not here on this in this conversation to talk about what's happening just today. It's the bigger, the larger, longer-term implications. Have we gotten to the point, Elie, where a vast majority of people in this country, a significant percentage of people, believe that every prosecution, whether it's Trump, Biden, this one, that one, and it's all political, and there are no facts and legitimate prosecutions going on. Have we become that jaded?
I think, I hate to be jaded, but I think whenever you're talking about an investigation or a prosecution of a high-profile political figure, the former president, current
of the United
president,
States running again in 2024.
Relatives of high-profile politicians, I think there's a huge percentage of the population who will say it's political, who can make that claim. Ultimately, it's going to go back and forth, and it's hard to tell whether there's any truth to it. To me, the best way to make that judgment is A, look at how serious is the crime. B, look at how strong the evidence is, and C, look at how similar cases have been handled. And here, I think there's arguments, not to play everything both ways, but here I think it's a tricky call. I mean, there are, on the one hand, there's an argument that by making these hush money payments, Trump helped himself win the presidency in 2016. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton's campaign actually was caught mischaracterizing fees that they used on the Steele dossier. They mischaracterized those also as legal fees, and all they got was an FEC fine, a Federal Election Commission fine. So there's a fair question there as to, is it fair that, look, they're not exactly identical conduct, but what one side gets a fine, the other side gets potentially prosecuted for it.
Let me shift gears for a second. The role of social media, not just in politics, but from a legal point of view. Donald Trump puts out on Truth Social, his site, I'm going to be arrested on a certain date. Again, we're taping on the 21st. We don't know. And by the way, being indicted is not exactly the same as being arrested in the way people view it. Cuffed, walk, perp walk, the whole bit. The role of social media in the judicial process, wreaking havoc, positive what?
Oh, it's a challenge for sure. Let's look at Donald Trump. Look at January 6th. I mean, a big reason why that riot happened is because of Donald Trump's use of social media. Be there, will be wild, right? He hyped up that rally. I think it was 10 times January 6th. That's how people knew to come to the rally on January 6th.
What does that have to do with the criminal prosecutorial process, Elie?
Well, what you don't want to see.
Social media to influence a judicial. Can you use social media to effectively or ineffectively impact the legal process?
You can use social media to do the same things that you're allowed to do otherwise. You are allowed to protest. You are allowed to criticize prosecutors. You are allowed to criticize judges. What you cannot do is try to incite violence. What you cannot do is threaten in some way a witness, a judge, a prosecutor, a party to a case. So the same lines as ever existed still exist. But now with social media, it's much easier to speak and to disseminate your speech widely.
I'll tell you what, there are a lot of moving parts of this. While people say, oh, Ellie's a legal expert on CNN, which he is, to say that there's no political consideration is just not true. To say that it's totally political is just not true. There's the confluence, if you will, of the legal process and the political process. That's not commentary. That's just a fact. But if you want to know more about, go ahead, Elie, last word before I let you go.
I agree with you. I mean, people prosecutors love to say facts and law, facts and law, facts and law. Every prosecutor ever has said facts and law to justify any conduct. If you hate Bill Barr, he said facts and law all the time. If you hate Merrick Garland, he says facts and law all the time. Alvin Bragg says it. Everyone says it on both sides of the ledger. And I think you're right. I don't look at prosecutors as sort of in a vacuum or above it all. I think prosecutors are well aware. I know prosecutors are well aware of the political world around them. And I think it's fair to ask whether this case would be brought against Donald Trump if he was any normal person. I've seen it argued both ways, and I think it's an interesting question.
And remember, some attorneys general are elected in their states. Some prosecutors are elected. The U.S. attorney, not elected, but appointed politically. It's a question of whether you're appointed or elected. Interesting stuff. Untouchable, how powerful people get away with it. Elie Honig. It's a national bestseller. Elie's one of our good friends, and check him out on CNN on a regular basis. Thank you, my friend. See you soon,
Steve.
Jersey guy.
Take care.
Another Jersey guy.
Proud to be from Jersey. Always glad to be with you.
You got it. See you next time, folks.
State of Affairs with Steve Adubato is a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Turrell Fund, supporting Reimagine Childcare. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together. MD Advantage Insurance Company. The Russell Berry Foundation, NJM Insurance Group, Prudential Financial, the New Jersey Education Association, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and by PSC. Promotional support provided by Meadowlands Chamber. And by New Jersey Monthly.
NJM Insurance Group has been serving New Jersey businesses for over a century. As part of the Garden State, we help companies keep their vehicles on the road, employees on the job, and projects on track. Working to protect employees from illness and injury, to keep goods and services moving across the state. We're proud to be part of New Jersey. NJM, we've got New Jersey covered.